I realized I was about to ruin my entire life the moment my future mother-in-law asked for my bank card PIN like it was the most normal thing in the world. What shocked me even more was the look on my fiance's face when I refused. There was no confusion, no embarrassment, no apology, just anger, pure anger, and less than 5 minutes later, the man who once promised to protect me was chasing me down an apartment hallway with his fist raised while his mother screamed behind him that I needed to be taught respect. My name is Melanie, and a little over 2 years ago, I thought I had finally found the kind of love people dream about. I met Brandon during a business networking event hosted by the financial company where I worked as a mortgage advisor. He came with one of his friends who handled IT security for the event. Brandon had an easy smile, calm energy, and the kind of attention that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. We talked almost the entire evening, laughing over terrible catering food and complaining about office politics like we had known each other for years. At the time, Brandon seemed stable and dependable. He worked as a systems engineer for a large tech company near Portland and lived alone in a modest apartment outside the city. He talked about wanting a peaceful life someday, a wife, children, weekend road trips, and family dinners. There was nothing flashy about him, and honestly, that was what attracted me most. After years of disappointing relationships, his quiet personality felt safe. 6 months later, he proposed during a small dinner overlooking the river, and I accepted without hesitation because I truly believed I was saying yes to a good man. The problem started slowly after the engagement, almost so quietly that I kept convincing myself I was overthinking things. One evening, we sat at his kitchen table planning the wedding guest list. I wanted something intimate and affordable because neither of us came from wealthy families. I suggested inviting around 30 people, only close friends and immediate relatives. Brandon barely looked up from his phone before casually telling me his mother expected us to invite the entire extended family, or she would feel insulted. I remember staring at him, waiting for him to laugh or admit he was joking, but he simply shrugged and said weddings only happen once. I asked him if he seriously wanted us spending thousands of dollars entertaining distant relatives he barely even talked to. Instead of answering like a partner, he repeated the exact words his mother had apparently already told him. He said she believed it was the proper thing to do. That was the first moment I noticed something unsettling. Brandon did not make decisions. He simply carried out whatever his mother wanted. His mother, Cheryl Dawson, was not the warm, supportive type. She was controlling in a way that slowly consumed every room she entered. She had spent most of her life managing employees at the same manufacturing company where Brandon now worked, and she treated her son like an extension of herself instead of an independent adult. Her husband had passed away years earlier, and since then, Brandon had become the center of her universe. She visited his apartment constantly, criticized how things were organized, brought groceries he never asked for, and inserted herself into every detail of his life. At first, I genuinely tried to build a good relationship with her. I thanked her for meals, smiled through awkward conversations, and ignored her habit of speaking to me like I was a teenager who needed instruction. But eventually I realized Cheryl was not interested in compromise or mutual respect. She expected obedience. One afternoon, while I was visiting Brandon after work, she proudly announced that she had already selected the bridal boutique where I would buy my wedding dress because one of her friends worked there and could arrange a discount. I politely explained that I had already chosen a dress from another boutique downtown because I absolutely loved it. The second I said that, her entire expression darkened. She immediately criticized the store, complained about the price, and insisted her option made more sense financially. Then she turned toward Brandon, clearly expecting him to pressure me into changing my mind. Instead of defending me, he gave an awkward little shrug and muttered that it was technically my decision. Cheryl stormed into the kitchen banging cabinets while Brandon sat there scrolling through his phone like nothing unusual had happened. That pattern repeated itself constantly over the following weeks. Cheryl chose the restaurant for the reception without asking me, approved the menu, contacted decorators, and even booked transportation before I had agreed to any of it. When I confronted Brandon, he admitted he had already given his mother money so she could handle the arrangements. I felt completely betrayed because we had promised to plan the wedding together. Instead, I felt like an outsider watching another woman build a ceremony around herself while my fiancé silently allowed it. Every time I expressed frustration, Brandon told me his mother was simply trying to help. But there is a huge difference between helping and controlling. Cheryl wanted authority over every decision, and Brandon expected me to quietly adapt to it. Deep down, I started feeling nervous about the future, but I kept convincing myself things would improve once the wedding stress disappeared. I wanted so badly to believe I was imagining the problem because admitting the truth felt terrifying. 2 weeks before the wedding, Cheryl arrived carrying several shopping bags filled with household items she proudly described as gifts for our future home. She unpacked old-fashioned towels, heavy cookware, embroidered bedding, and giant cast iron pans that looked like they belonged in another decade. I thanked her politely and explained that I already had most of the kitchen supplies I needed. I left shortly afterward because I could feel anger building inside me. Brandon followed me outside apologizing and begging me not to overreact. He promised everything would calm down after the wedding, but by then, doubt had already settled deep inside me. A week before the ceremony, Brandon casually asked if I would give him access to my bank card. At first I thought he meant for emergencies, but the conversation quickly became uncomfortable. He explained that married couples should not keep financial information private and said it would be easier if he knew my PIN ahead of time. I asked him why he needed permanent access to my personal account when we could simply discuss expenses together. Instead of answering directly, he accused me of not trusting him enough. That conversation stayed in my mind for days because something about it felt deeply wrong. Still, I tried convincing myself we were both just stressed from the wedding preparations. At first the conversation seemed harmless. She asked about work, my salary, and how busy the bank had been recently. Then suddenly she leaned closer and suggested that after the wedding I should give her my bank card PIN so she could help manage groceries and emergency expenses. For a moment I genuinely thought I misunderstood her. But the longer she spoke, the more serious she became. She accused me of being selfish and uncaring toward the family. I reminded her that we were not even related yet, and that marriage did not give her ownership over my finances. Instead of backing down, she started yelling for Brandon to come into the living room immediately. I waited for him to laugh at the absurdity of the situation. I waited for him to tell his mother she had crossed a line. Instead, he frowned at me and asked why I was making such a huge issue out of something so small. The second those words left his mouth, something inside me completely broke. I saw a man who would always choose his mother over me no matter how unreasonable she became. The moment I stepped into the hallway, Brandon came rushing after me. He grabbed my arm aggressively and demanded we continue the conversation. I pulled away and told him I was leaving, but he refused to let go. His face twisted with anger while Cheryl stood in the apartment doorway yelling that I was disrespecting their family. Then everything escalated in seconds. He tightened his grip on my arm and suddenly raised his fist like he intended to hit me. Fear hit me instantly, but instinct moved faster. I twisted sideways and drove my knee upward with every ounce of strength I had. Brandon collapsed immediately, screaming in pain while clutching himself on the hallway floor. Cheryl rushed toward him sobbing dramatically while I stood there shaking from adrenaline and disbelief. During the taxi ride, I stared out the window in complete silence while my hands trembled uncontrollably. The second I got inside my apartment, I collapsed onto the couch and cried harder than I had cried in years. But those tears were not about heartbreak, they were about escape. Over the following weeks, Brandon repeatedly tried contacting me from random phone numbers and fake social media accounts. Cheryl even appeared outside my workplace screaming that I had destroyed her son's life. Security eventually forced her to leave while customers stared at the scene in shock. Brandon later sent me a long apology claiming he finally understood his mistakes and promising he would stand up to his mother. I read the message once, deleted it, and never responded. Months later, one of my friends called to tell me Brandon was already dating someone else. Apparently Cheryl accompanied them everywhere and even ordered food for the new girlfriend during dinner outings. Instead of feeling jealous, I laughed harder than I had in weeks because it confirmed exactly what I already knew. Brandon was not looking for a wife. He was looking for someone willing to submit to his mother's authority for the rest of her life. Carter listened quietly before telling me something I still remember clearly today. He said people who try controlling you before marriage only become worse after marriage, and leaving had probably saved my future. We eventually married in a quiet ceremony surrounded only by people who genuinely loved and respected us. During our first dance, Carter held me close and softly asked if I was happy.